Welcome and thank you for joining me. I am Verone and this is just another voice. I know I said that I was just going to do one quick video on the Batman before my big project I teased in my first video, but I'm afraid I've had Batman on the brain lately, so I need to get it out of my system. As I assume you know, this video is exploring the potential for the sequels to Matt Reeves' film, and then I want to make one final Batman video covering in more depth what annoys me, particularly about the Riddler in the movie and how I would change it. So if you like what you see here and want to see that when it comes out soon, please like and subscribe, and of course turn on your notifications. Now without further ado, let's get into it. There are three main antagonists everyone is talking about in relation to the sequels, and those are the Court of Owls, the Joker, and Hush. I will definitely be talking about the first two here, but I don't think we'll be seeing the third. I could be wrong, but I don't see Hush coming up in future movies. I'm pretty sure that reference in The Batman was just a nod to the Hush character, as the plot of the movie drew on that storyline strongly enough, and this version of the Riddler was reminiscent enough of the bandaged villain, that I think it would feel pretty redundant. I feel confident that the Riddler's plot in the Batman is the closest thing we'll get to a Hush storyline in this particular universe, and personally, I'm happy with that, since I think Hush is a bit overrated. Just a bit. I don't hate him, but I love the Riddler in the Hush storyline way more than Hush himself. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments if you think Hush would make a great villain in a sequel and why. Another character that's been talked about a decent amount has been Mr. Freeze, since Matt Reeves talked about wanting to try bringing him to life in this grounded universe. And I would absolutely love to see how he would go about that. But personally, I think it would be a mistake to use him in this trilogy. I'm not saying that Matt can't work him into his vision perfectly, but for this video I've been trying to make a storyline spanning these movies that, together, brings Batman to a certain place and sets up key characters and relationships along the way. And Mr. Freeze just doesn't really seem to fit into that to me. I didn't want anything here that wouldn't contribute to Bruce's development over the course of this series. A lot of people have just been listing baddies they want to see in live action and hoping for them to appear, and some of them certainly could make minor guest appearances along the way. But this trilogy needs to tell a story with the limited time it has, and use the characters it needs to tell that story. Alright, time to get into my Batman trilogy. This is based purely on speculation to form a possible story that I think Matt Reeves could use to continue the development of Bruce into the Batman we all know. And I'm sure he knows best whatever he does with it. Starting with The Batman Part 2. I'm pretty dang sure we'll be seeing all-out gang warfare over the chaotic, lawless, and largely submerged Gotham as Penguin battles for power, ending the second film with him as the undisputed kingpin of the city. No doubt there, that's sure to be the setting, and I hope Penguin is the main antagonist, as Batman tries to stop his bloodbath and fails to contain the cascade of violence that ensues. Very No Man's Land and Zero Year-esque, as well as drawing on storylines like The Long Halloween and Dark Victory that heavily feature lots of criminal intrigue. And I really hope to see Harvey Dent involved as he runs for, or is already serving as, DA, depending on how much time has passed since The Batman. This will be tricky to make work without feeling like a story we've already seen before with The Dark Knight, but the character fits too well into this grounded universe not to use, and I think his past live-action appearances have actually missed the very duality that defines him, simply going from Boy Scout to Anton Chigurh in a moment. For once, I would show his dissociative identity disorder and his struggle against his dark half before he ever becomes Two-Face, but hold off on transforming him fully, at least until the third installment, if at all in this trilogy. But more on him later. While I don't necessarily want to see Bruce develop his playboy persona, like some who just miss what they're used to, I think it would be great if, after frustration with his largely futile efforts as Batman, and some convincing from Batman and Bella Real, he eventually decides to use his wealth and influence as Bruce Wayne to help Gotham get back on its feet, coming out in the open as a philanthropist figure and truly honoring his parents' legacy, seizing the renewal fund from the corrupt and rebuilding it. Frankly, we could see hints that the Playboy persona was just created by the speculative public, with news headlines like Playboy turned philanthropist. It would seem the Riddler's tainting of his family legacy just inspired him to come out and rebuild it. Bruce's new corporate activity could lead into hints toward the Court of Owls as he realizes just how corrupt his own company is, essentially just serving as a puppet for all the behind-the-scenes forces of the city since his parents' death. And he makes plenty of enemies as he tries to take it from them, which is no easy task. We better see Lucius Fox as an ally here, by the way. I hope we get strong hints towards the court as Bruce battles for his company, both as Bruce and as Batman, and unmasks further corruption within it, building up to their eventual reveal later on. Harvey Dent, told you I'd come back to him, could also play a prominent role in helping Bruce uncover and root out the corruption in his company, and maybe that's why he gets so brutally attacked, for breaking the court's hold over Wayne Enterprises that holds so much of Gotham together. The second film could end with Bruce, now in charge of Wayne Enterprises, thanks in major part to Harvey, and promising to live up to the family legacy, and use his company to finally fulfill his parents' promise of renewal. But those who controlled the Wayne Empire are not dead, and at the end of the film, they attack and disfigure Harvey in revenge. Alright, that was part 2. In summary, Bruce is fighting in vain to contain the bloodbath consuming Gotham and take down the Penguin, while deciding to redeem his family legacy and make a real impact by fighting to take back his company, discovering the corruption within it goes far deeper than he ever realized. I think there's room for another villain to show up within this plot and tie everything together, and there are lots of options. Let me know in the comments who you think would fit this story best, or if you think it needs another villain at all and works just fine as it is. Moving on to the third movie, Bruce finds himself being targeted for murder. As he tries to survive and find out who's after him, it becomes clear that they know who he is. But as he searches for those who tried to kill him, he discovers new hints towards his parents' murder. All this draws him into an investigation of the Court of Owls. Maybe he finds evidence to suggest his parents were killed by those now controlling his company in a bid to take it over. And through this hunt for answers that takes him deep into the city's history, he comes to realize and confront the true motivation for his whole crusade. A desperate desire for closure. He goes to the Riddler for help, who plays with him on this hunt, offering him cryptic hints along the way, but ultimately, it turns out that, plot twist, Nashton was really just leading him down a gauntlet of psychological torture to a final trap all along. He staged it all, and the Court of Owls are history after all. Or are they? See, I would leave their actual existence ambiguous. There is deep corruption and conspiracy within Gotham and Wayne Enterprises, no doubt, and there was a mysterious cabal known as the Court of Owls that lasted into the 20th century and was the root of much of the current corruption, and the Riddler used all this information to create a narrative that he used to string Bruce along, but there's no evidence the court isn't still around and behind the city's corruption, even if the Riddler made up some of the evidence to suggest that they were behind his parents' murder, or at least used it misleadingly to manipulate Bruce. So whatever this final trap is for Bruce, I don't know, but it's all Nashton's revenge plot, his promised comeback, and we see him don his classic suit, perhaps to distinguish himself from the Bat he once emulated. Of course, all this means he has discovered his identity, though, in my slightly tweaked version of the first movie you'll be getting here soon, maybe he knew all along. You'll just have to watch it and see, so go watch out for that video. Anyway, when Bruce comes out the other end of all this, he's finally accepted that he doesn't need an answer to his parents' death. It could have been random or conspiracy, and it doesn't matter. He realizes everything he's done as Batman has been about finding some sort of elusive closure for his trauma, and he accepts that he'll never get that. He doesn't get over his pain, of course, because he can't. It's still what drives him. But he accepts it, and in so doing manages to overcome and move past it in a way, at last letting go of the need for the catharsis he has so desperately craved all these years. Alright, that's essentially the trilogy I would like to see. Of course, Matt Reeves knows best and will make it work, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't do something sort of like this, at least in basic structure. It all follows the same themes and gradually develops Bruce into the Batman we all know, setting up key relationships and characters along the way, and is definitely a single continuous arc rather than a series of completely independent stories, though they'll certainly be great on their own as well. But wait a minute, I almost forgot about the Joker. He's been a controversial point among fans who either can't wait to see him, or don't want to at all. I'm inclined to agree that he's been done to death, and I would like to see other villains, but every Batman needs a Joker. Batman's not Batman without his ultimate antithesis, so I think it was not only a good choice, but the only choice to include him. However, I hope he's more just the manipulative mastermind behind everything in every film, trying to get inside Bruce's head through everyone else, and he isn't at the forefront of any one movie. We'd see more of him each time, but he's always in the shadows, laughing at Batman from somewhat of a distance. Then perhaps at the end of the last movie, they finally have a face-to-face confrontation in which Joker, finally now truly the Joker and not some proto-Joker, gives his whole nihilistic worldview and describes his bizarre relationship to Batman, setting up their relation for the future and promising to be only the beginning for them. Now, there are a lot of things very lacking in this trilogy I described for you that I would absolutely love to see brought to life by Matt Reeves. things I've previously said I would love to see in future movies, namely Robin. And, well, I still want to see them. I just don't think they would fit in the setup series I outlined, and so I hope that this trilogy is only the beginning for the Battinson. I hope that we can get a lot more films and or shows afterward, maybe even a show about Batman and Robin starting after the third film. I hope this universe builds and expands for long into the future, becoming almost like the MCU, but just for Batman's world, since it is, in my mind, essentially the definitive on screen iteration of The Dark Knight, and that is an incredible accomplishment. Anyway, what would you most like to see in the future? Do you have any ideas of your own for the sequels? How big do you want this Batverse to get? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, never stay silent.